important that the American people realize the scope of assault on America today that is happening across this globe.
That's true. Thank you. Great job, Ethan. Thank you. Marcus?
Yeah, Mr. President, I mean, as you know, we often talk about this, and I'm constantly thanking you for finally standing up to China after far too long of not doing it as an American government. This is the first time since 1991 that we have a near-peer competitor in the world. It was only America and everybody else, and now we are starting to wake up to the reality that we have a near-peer competitor, and this competitor is cheating and stealing and undermining us using virtually every tool at their disposal, and one of them is intellectual property theft. They steal this stuff from us, oftentimes innovated through American taxpayer investment, and then they reverse engineer it and use it for their own purposes because they seek to replace us in the world, not to be equal to us, to overtake us. And it's almost too late, but finally someone is standing up to them, and I'm grateful to your administration for making this a priority on every front, on trade, but also on national security. And I'm glad we're having this meeting today, and we'll be with you every step of the way on this.
Well, great job, Marco. And I have to tell you that, and you see, you brought it up to me the other day. So our country, since the election, we're up $10 trillion in worth. And unfortunately, but this is the way it goes, China over the last 4 months is down about $15 trillion. We have to stop it. We can't allow the things that were happening to happen. And also we can't allow just common trade to stay the way it was. 517 billion in deficits each year. So that's not happening anymore. No, I think we're going to, and as you see, we're rising very rapidly. We're rising. And people have said to me, it's the first time they've ever seen it where the United States is like the hot country. We used to be a hot country many years ago, but now we're the hot country again. Everybody wants to be here. Companies are moving in. And we want some of these companies to move in also, and they're going to be now protected, and we're going to be protected that there won't be theft of high-grade technology. So thank you, Mark. I appreciate it. John?
Mr. President, under your administration, we're finally taking the big steps to address the national security threat posed by China, which has grown dramatically, as others have already said. And I believe that China represents the foremost national security and economic challenge to our country of any other country in the world.
Not Russia?
In the long term.
Not Russia?
In the long term. In addition to its military transformation and its belligerence in places like the South China Sea, as Senator Crapo, Senator Rubio have pointed out, they have engaged in outright theft of our intellectual property, but this addresses the problem of foreign investment made strategically to exploit gaps in the Committee on Foreign Investment, and for them to be able to acquire the know-how and intellectual property they need in order to gain access to this cutting-edge dual-use technology. I just want to express my appreciation to Secretary Mnuchin and Secretary Mattis, the Attorney General, Secretary Ross, and your entire administration for your partnership. We could not have gotten this done without each of these people at the table, and certainly the leadership of Chairman Crapo on the Senate side, Chairman Henserling on the House side. And this is a great accomplishment. Now we need to make sure it gets implemented, and that's I know we're top of Secretary Mnuchin's list to make sure it operates as Congress intended in order to accomplish these goals.
Well, I think not enough focus has been put on China, and that's been for a long time. And we want to have big focus is on Russia. Not enough focus is on China and other countries, frankly, not just Russia and China. It's many countries we have to watch, and probably individuals also. But this goes a long way, and I appreciate very much your words. You've done a great job. Thank you very much, John. Steve?
I appreciate the opportunity to work with everybody in this room on this important legislation. I think this is just a great example of the Senate and the House working together, giving us at CFIUS the new critical tools that we need to protect investments in the United States while also allowing for investments in the United States. And we will be launching the pilot program very quickly, and we look forward to full implementation of the legislation next year. So thank you to everybody, and
You guys like all those cameras behind your head as you're speaking? I'd be I'd take a long time in combing my hair if I was going to be in that seat. I'd take a long time. Tom?
Well, it's a really good thing that the Congress now recognizes China as our chief long-term rival. We've known for a long time that China's been hurting our manufacturing sector. They're not buying enough of our agricultural products. They discriminate against our companies. You know, they just turned down the merger from Qualcomm, an American company, and NXP, a Dutch company. It had nothing to do with China, just to hurt the United States and our jobs here. They've been conducting espionage for years. You know, you've noticed that their jets look a lot like our jets in our military.
Especially the F-22.
Exactly. And now they're just outright buying our technology. You know, they don't have to steal it so much anymore, especially if you've got smaller companies that have critical breakthroughs in technology or artificial intelligence or quantum computing, what have you. This legislation will allow us to recognize those threats for what they are and to stop China from buying our most critical technology that we need to maintain our role as the world's greatest superpower. So I thank you for your support for this legislation. Thanks for all my peers around the table, and encourage Secretary Mnuchin and everyone on the Committee on Foreign Investment to take a very tough look at everything that China's doing in the United States.
And Tom, you know, we put a $50 billion number out there. Now, the total number is $250 billion, but of that, $50 billion has to do with technology, high tech and things, and there's a 25% tax on that now coming in. And I think that economically also helps us. This is very different, but it also helps us. And people are saying that's already having a big effect. And it is already, we're collecting that money. It's a lot of money. Much of it is being collected. Some of it starts in a week. But it's a tremendous amount of money coming into the coffers of the United States, which nobody has ever seen that before. Nobody has ever come close to seeing that before, actually. Jeff?
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm very happy to represent the House today. I don't know what to think about the ratio. Does it take one House member to equal 4 senators? I don't know. We'll let people draw their own implications. Mr. President, I just came from doing a series of town hall meetings in the 5th District of Texas. People are enjoying, most of them, the best economy in their lifetimes, and they send their gratitude. Your leadership on the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, the deregulatory agenda of this administration has made a real difference. But you know, this administration knows we're not going to keep 3% plus economic growth if our intellectual property and technology is taken from us by hook and crook and ill-gotten gains and improper leverage. So with your leadership, CFIUS has been updated for the first time in a decade. Needed gaps were filled. And I also, Mr. President, want to just thank you for helping unite Congress and unite our nation, because the bill that came out of the House was almost unanimous. I think we had 2 or 3 dissenting votes. And so Congress is united to ensure that this intellectual property theft does not continue, that we stand up to all the countries that are not playing by the rules, including and especially China. So I want to thank my fellow Texan in the Senate for leading here, my counterpart, Senator Crape. I want to thank a couple of House members who aren't here, Robert Pittenger of North Carolina, who authored originally the House bill, Andy Barr, who helped shepherd it through our committee. And I want to thank the Secretary, who played a very vital role, Mr. President, in negotiating those few differences between the House and Senate and ensuring that we could get this into the NDAA and get your signature. So I wanted to acknowledge his help as well.
Thank you, Jeff, very much. This is really a great achievement, and I want to thank everybody in the room very much. Great job. Thank you, everybody, very much. Thank you.
Okay, great. Okay. Oh, wait, we're going in.
All right, guys, that was President Trump inside the White House today. Just a few moments ago, we had that tape re-racked and played out for you. This discussion on intellectual property, national security, and tech security coming a day after a lot of fallout with the campaign finance violations of his former chairman, Paul Manafort, and his lawyer, Michael Cohen, were under fire. Now, Sarah Sanders took multiple questions about this yesterday at the press briefing. She seemed to shut them all down. Here's some of the top stories of today, Thursday, August 23rd, reaction to some of that fallout of the violations, and also some other stories we've been covering, including the vigil for the Iowa college student Molly Tibbetts, who was found dead yesterday. So take a look at some of our top stories, and then we'll take you over to some other really interesting events that are going on today, including this morning. The Medal of Honor ceremony happened a couple of days ago. President Trump awarding that posthumously to Air Force Commander John Chapman. Today, though, he was inducted into the Hall of Fame at the Pentagon. It was a really beautiful ceremony over there, so we'll play some of that out for you as well. But here are some of the top stories of today.
Fallout from the Michael Cohen developments this week. There are legal questions and there are political ones, with talk of indictments and even impeachment. The White House may have been largely dark at 1 a.m. this morning, but out came this 5-word tweet from the president. No collusion, rigged witch hunt. Clearly, the Mueller probe is weighing on the president's mind after he saw his former personal attorney, Michael Cohen, turn on him this week and implicate him in 2 campaign finance violations. Payments to keep 2 women quiet during the 2016 campaign, something the president says wasn't a crime.
And they weren't taken out of campaign finance. That's a big thing. That's a much bigger thing. Did they come out of the campaign? They didn't come out of the campaign. They came from me.
And while legal experts may not all agree on what constitutes a campaign violation in this instance, the political fallout may be a little more clear, with Democrats looking for consequences.
Every single remedy, including indictment of the president, should be on the table.
Some Democrats say the Senate should no longer even consider the president's nominee to the Supreme Court, Brett Kavanaugh. And beyond possible indictments, there is the other I word to think about: impeachment.
We already have between 50 and 60 House Democrats already on the record saying they want to impeach this president. It's not going to take much after a midterm election for that number to get to 200.
But much of that depends on the outcome of the November midterm elections, and the president plans to spend a lot of time campaigning for Republican candidates. In Washington, Doug Luzader, Fox News.
As the search for Molly Tibbetts segues into a murder investigation, people across the country mourn the loss of the beautiful, kind-spirited 20-year-old.
She was just bubbly and instantaneously happy when you met her. I just have this memory of her smiling and like holding hands with my one friend, and that was just like pure happiness right there.
One day after investigators recovered Molly's body, hundreds of hands came together to light up the University of Iowa's campus, where Molly was pursuing a degree in psychology.
And find someone you've never met before.
Before a moment of silence, brother Jake Tibbetts asked everyone to turn and greet a stranger with a smile, a nod to Molly's contagiously friendly personality.
What about you guys?
Jake, joined by several cousins, embraced Molly's peers at Wednesday night's vigil. The family releasing a statement earlier in the day saying, quote, "We know that many of you will join us as we continue to carry Molly in our hearts forever."
Yeah, absolutely.
Fox sat down with the mother just hours before Molly's body was found in rural Poweshiek County, Iowa. She imagined what Molly would tell her.
She wouldn't want us to be feeling sorrow or pain. I know that. So it's just, and that's part of my strength. It's just like, stay positive.
In Iowa City, Iowa, Emily Ikeda, Fox News.
The news has become more and more worrisome in terms of the direction of Hurricane Lane.
The state of Hawaii is bracing for impact as a life-threatening hurricane approaches, sending some fleeing for the mainland.
But I'm really relieved to get out of there.
Kelsey Brown is a meteorologist for the U.S. Air Force. She's stationed at Pearl Harbor and decided to get out.
As far as like stores, everything was completely wiped out. We had like no water. Gas stations were crazy. We couldn't get any gas. Like lines were like miles down the road. Just chaotic.
With a little help from Mom and over $1,000 later, Kelsey was on a first-class flight back to LAX.
It feels good. She's my baby. I'm happy that she's home.
Peter and Teresa Corral had a similar idea. They decided to cut their Oahu vacation short ahead of the storm.
We have a house in Cabo, so we know what hurricanes do, so we wanted to get out of there before it came in.
Last night, it seemed like everyone hit the stores. Generators were gone, shelves were cleared out. Yeah.
And then there's this family. They came all the way from Germany for a dream trip to Hawaii, a trip that won't be happening.
Now we go to the Hawaiian Airlines and want to cancel it because the hurricane, and they don't cancel it. We want to get the money back for 3 flights.
They say Hawaiian Airlines offered to reschedule them in September, but they'll be back in Germany by then, and their $1,700 is now down the drain.
Now we go back to the Marriott Hotel, and we are very crying, but the children are crying.
There were also people flying to Hawaii Wednesday night. One of them was Oahu resident Henry McNamara.
Not too concerned yet tonight because I'll probably get in there safe, but definitely in the coming days, it'll definitely be a pretty dangerous hurricane that's coming pretty close.
And then there's Rebecca Romero.
I'm feeling really excited to take a vacation to Hawaii, all paid by my parents.
She too was flying out Wednesday night with a friend, and she's telling Hurricane Lane to bring it on. Any second thoughts about still going?
Oh no, this is gonna be awesome. I'm gonna go out on the beach and I'm gonna take my camera right in the eye of the storm.
In a category 4? Are you crazy?
Yes, she doesn't understand what's happening.
A Spirit Airlines flight bound for Fort Lauderdale making an emergency landing in Jacksonville due to a hydraulic issue, authorities say.
They said they had a hydraulic issue that's vibrating on the left wing and that they have to make an emergency landing, but everything's okay. Then they made another announcement. They said it was the right side.
The flight left Newark, New Jersey early Wednesday morning and landed in Jacksonville just after 8. None of the 225 passengers on board were injured.
Wasn't nervous at all because I felt like they could have just flown another 30 minutes and just got to the destination.
Travelers were rebooked and landed in Fort Lauderdale just after 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Some passengers were irritated.
We're not sure what the exact issue was, but worst flight ever. They told us nothing until 20 minutes ago.
Others just glad to have arrived safely. I mean, you're a little late, but you got here safely.
Yeah, that's what counts. It's better to be alive.
Legendary Ohio State football coach Urban Meyer will be sitting out the first 3 games of this year's football season.
The suspensions are tough, but I fully accept them.
The decision comes following a 2-week investigation into the way Meyer and the program handled domestic violence allegations against a former assistant coach. The school's board of trustees held a 10-hour closed-door meeting before making the announcement. Meyer has been on paid leave since the allegations surfaced against assistant coach Zach Smith, who is accused of being violent with his now ex-wife Courtney Smith in 2015. She claims Meyer and the football program knew about the abuse and failed to stop it. Zach Smith was fired July 23rd.
I followed my heart, not my head. I fell short in pursuing full information because at each juncture, I gave Zach Smith the benefit of the doubt. I should have done more, and I am sorry for that.
Coach Meyer initially said he was unaware of the alleged abuse, but retracted his denial, saying he had followed proper reporting protocols and procedures, adding that he was not trying to cover for Smith.
I was not being as complete, as accurate as I should have been at media day and afterward, but there is no intent to mislead.
Meyer isn't the only one benched. Gene Smith, the school's athletic director, has also been suspended without pay from August 31st through September 16th.
I fully support the findings of the report.
Ohio State football is ranked number 5 in a preseason poll. It remains to be seen how the team will perform without their famed head coach for 3 games. In New York, Jack Callahan, Fox News.
$40 would go towards trimming Leslie Wesson's lawn, $200 towards his PG&E bill. He says the rest of a potential $500 stipend would go towards peace of mind.
I don't need no stress. And that's one of the main things my doctor told me. He said, and I stress about little things.
Wesson's neighborhood is just one of many which qualifies for a program known as the Stockton Economic Empowerment Demonstration, or SEED. where the effects of a universal basic income will be tested.
Other cities have followed suit.
Mayor Michael Tubbs and researchers outlined how they will choose 100 people to receive $500 a month for 18 months.
I have no say, no influence, have no idea. They're building an algorithm that will pick that to make sure it's representative of the diversity.
Recipients will be chosen from throughout the city where the median income is less than $46,000. He also explains where the money comes from.
This is not taxpayer funded. It's funded by an initial grant from the Economic Security Project, and we've raised more money on top of that.
Tubbs says 1,000 mailers will go out to eligible families in November. Once mailed back, 100 will be picked. Recipients must be at least 18 years old, and while researchers will check in, the money is unconditional.
There's no restrictions on how people can use the money. So if people use it for drugs and alcohol, that's their prerogative.
Critics have argued little oversight leads to abuse, but Mayor Tubbs says he has faith.
If I didn't believe in the capacity of the folks who elected me and who I represent every day to make good decisions, I probably shouldn't be mayor.
Wesson, who can only walk a few steps at a time, says he's lived through a stroke, been on life support twice, and the money would help him thrive.
And you're here now. That's miraculous.
Yeah. Thank God for deliverance.
60,000% inflation. Venezuelans need a stack of money to buy a bag of rice, if one's available. The government solution? Just drop 5 zeros from the currency.
That is a trick, a makeover that the government is doing to the national economy. This is a terrible deception. Removing 5 zeros does not improve the economy at all.
The International Monetary Fund says this year, inflation in Venezuela could hit 1,000,000%. President Nicolas Maduro also announced a 3,000% minimum wage increase and raised corporate taxes and gasoline prices. Analysts say that will likely accelerate hyperinflation.
If this is poorly executed or unfeasible, in the end it is a tremendous economic contraction, layoffs, a much more limited supply of goods.
The focus on zeros also creates confusion, as Venezuelans are left dividing by 100,000 to try to figure out how much they have and how much items cost. Millions have fled the country, most across the bridge to Cúcuta, a Colombian border town. Many will eat a hot meal, drink clean water, receive medicine, and return home. Others move on across Latin America. The United States has sanctioned the Maduro regime as it consolidates power there, though the U.S. Navy has also sent a hospital ship off the coast of Colombia to treat Venezuelan refugees. The United States says Venezuela's leader is the foundation of its problems and that Maduro should go. Venezuelans who have escaped to Colombia tell us the Maduro regime has further suppressed individual freedoms, especially after an alleged assassination attempt there earlier this month. At the State Department, Rich Edson, Fox News.
Our employee was not who he said he was.
The man charged in the kidnapping and murder of 20-year-old Molly Tibbetts worked for 4 years at an Iowa dairy farm under false identification. The co-owners of Yarraby Farm speaking out after 24-year-old Christian Rivera made his first court appearance Wednesday. The Lang family saying Rivera used a state ID and social security card when he applied for his job, but now it appears those IDs belong to someone else. According to officials, Rivera has been in the United States illegally for the last 4 to 7 years.
There will be plenty of time to discuss immigration, but however, now is not the time.
Home surveillance video leading police to Rivera, who admitted to following Tibbetts in his car while she was out for a run on July 18th. Rivera went on to lead police to Molly's body, which was buried in a nearby cornfield. His employer saying no one noticed anything suspicious from Rivera after Molly's disappearance.
Nobody saw a difference. This guy stayed around for 35 days after he did this. Nobody noticed anything different.
Meanwhile, hundreds gathered at the University of Iowa Wednesday night for a vigil honoring Molly, her brother asking that people show kindness to one another, just like Molly would have done.
Carry on her legacy. Remember, this is a time that a country came together for one girl that loved everyone.
Rivera's bond has been set at $5 million. He is due back in court on August 31st. In Iowa City, Emily Ikeda, Fox News.
Medical technology that once kept premature human babies healthy is now helping zoo animals continue the circle of life. And it's just the start to an unusual collaboration between St. Luke's and Zoo Boise.
I wasn't sure if we had anything, but I told her I would look.
And St. Luke's did have something, an incubator they could no longer use on human patients, but would work perfectly for animals.
We might put a sick animal in here just because sick animals don't thermoregulate very well. We might use it to incubate eggs.
Zoo Boise plans to incubate eggs from penguins, birds, and even a few reptiles when needed.
So while snakes like the rosy boa won't need to use the incubator, other snakes like the green tree python will use the incubator for their eggs.
The most common use for the incubator will be for the penguins during their breeding season. Sometimes penguins and other birds can't regulate their eggs' temperatures well enough on their own, so they need a little help.
Birds that are not particularly good parents or maybe first-time parents, that way you have kind of like one in safekeeping that you can control everything.
The hospital also donated scales and other monitoring devices that will be adapted for the animals' needs.
We're learning more and more that we can use some of the technology that was developed in human medicine for our needs as well.
The penguins even gave the hospital a special thank you gift of their own.
The penguins walk through paint that is water soluble.
And the humans involved are more than happy to keep helping these exotic patients.
The incubator is something that we use to support our smallest patients who are one day going to grow up and go see these animals. So now it gets to help those animals.
Jessica Taylor, Fox 9 Now.
You're a superstar.
We've been working this for 8 years since I got out of the Marine Corps and got into Congress.
Now, Duncan Hunter works to save his career after prosecutors indicted the 5-term California congressman and his wife for allegedly spending $250,000 in campaign money on ski trips and vacations in Europe, dental bills, private school tuition, video games, golf, groceries, tequila, and more.
That's what this markup's all about.
Hunter earns $174,000 a year. His wife is paid another $36,000 as campaign manager. Yet the indictment says the Hunters spent substantially more than they earned. They overdrew their bank account more than 1,100 times over 7 years, resulting in $37,761 in overdraft fees. Hunter claims the indictment is a political hit job by 2 prosecutors who attended a Hillary Clinton fundraiser in 2015, though the U.S. Attorney's Office there is run by a Trump-appointed Republican. Hunter's father, a former congressman, defended his son.
It's politically motivated by hardcore Democrats who want to get Duncan Hunter out of Congress.
With Election Day just months away, Republicans expected to win this district. Now the seat may be up for grabs.
The Department of Justice is supposed to be separate from the political process, yet anything that the Department of Justice does with any member of Congress, of course, will become political with an election in November.
The San Diego Union Tribune is calling on Hunter to resign, leaving a 29-year-old Democrat and former Obama official in what would essentially be a one-man race.
Now is the time to put country over party.
Though House Speaker Ryan stripped Hunter of his committee assignments, the congressman plans to fight the charges. In Los Angeles, William Lejeunesse, Fox News.
Here's the billfold. Roy Roths, now 100 years old, remembers losing it in 1941 inside of a bomber on the assembly line in California. He was an electrical inspector whose job it was to climb through the plane's tight spaces.
Well, I went back and I looked in every one of the airplanes I worked on, like 2 or 3, and I looked all over them and tried to find it, and no luck.
This man did find Roy's wallet. Edgar Warren Birds had been in the Royal Air Force in Derbyshire, England, according to Roy's family. How and when he found it, we don't know, but Bird's family says it was passed down 2 more generations after his death. His granddaughter, Diane McKinnon of Scotland, located Roy's family on the internet, thinking he'd be long deceased by now.
She was shocked, and the thing she was hoping for is that she didn't know her grandfather because he passed away a few decades ago. So she was hoping my dad somehow had known her grandfather, but that wasn't the story.
Roy still gets around pretty well. He lives in Arbor Terrace, a senior living community in Peachtree City, and he'll celebrate his 101st birthday in December. Inside that wallet was Roy's driver's license. He'd just gotten out of the Navy, so his address was the USS Phoenix. Not much help in returning the wallet.
That we're really thankful to this family for getting the documents and the wallet back to us.
I cannot imagine why somebody kept that wallet through 3 generations. I'm going to keep it as a keepsake.
Roy says he's never lost a wallet before. Says he'll do a better job of hanging on to that one. Plans to pass it down to his children with the great story that goes along with it. In Peachtree City, Doug Evans, Fox 5 News.
$40 would go towards trimming Leslie Wesson's lawn, $200 towards his PG&E bill. He says the rest of a potential $500 stipend would go towards peace of mind.
I don't need no stress. And that's one of the main things my doctor told me. Said, you know, and I stress about little things.
Wesson's neighborhood is just one of many which qualifies for a program known as the Stockton Economic Empowerment Demonstration, or SEED, where the effects of a universal basic income will be tested.
Other cities have followed suit.
Mayor Michael Tubbs and researchers outlined how they will choose 100 people to receive $500 a month for 18 months.
I have no say, no influence, have no idea. They're building an algorithm that will pick that to make sure it's representative of the diversity.
Recipients will be chosen from throughout the city where the median income is less than $46,000. He also explains where the money comes from.
This is not taxpayer funded. It's funded by an initial grant from the Economic Security Project, and we've raised more money on top of that.
Tubbs says 1,000 mailers will go out to eligible families in November. Once mailed back, 100 will be picked. Recipients must be at least 18 years old, and while researchers will check in, the money is unconditional.
There's no restrictions on how people can use the money. So if people use it for drugs and alcohol, that's their prerogative.
Critics have argued little oversight leads to abuse, but Mayor Tubbs says he has faith.
If I didn't believe in the capacity of the folks who elected me and who I represent every day to make good decisions, I probably shouldn't be mayor.
Wesson, who can only walk a few steps at a time, says he's lived through a stroke, been on life support twice, and the money would help him thrive.
And you're here now. That's miraculous.
Yeah. Thank God for deliverance.
It's a selfless act. Instead of receiving gifts, Liam, who turned 6 years old today, is giving gifts to shelter dogs for his birthday.
Giving them to the dogs so I can make them happy.
His mom, Jennifer Faber, says he wanted to give 100 toys away to dogs at the Maricopa County Animal Care and Control Shelter. So she asked her friends.
Been collecting them for almost a month now, and friends and family have told friends and family who've told friends and family.
Yes, a lot of people.
It spread like wildfire, and they ended up getting hundreds of toys, more than 400.
A pig honking and 2-pack of cat toys.
The people who had my address would like our close friends. Otherwise, they send them. We have a PO box that they send them to the PO box. Or some people even ordered them at local like PetSmarts near our house.
And we're told as of right now, the shelter has more toys than dogs. So that means every dog will get a toy, and then they're going to keep the toys for future dogs to come.
The shelter says this is the first time this many toys have been given to them by such a young dog lover.
He's saying, can I come with you?
So they gave him something back in return to thank him.
So thank you for coming here and helping all the little dogs that we have a happy day. So we hope you have a happy birthday.
Courtney Griffin, Fox 10 News.
As students in Rancho Cordova head back to class, they're seeing a new face on campus.
She comes to school every day.
Meet Zoe. She's the newest addition to the Rancho Cordova police force. And the 20-month-old German short-haired pointer just started her new assignment as a police canine.
She's trained to detect 5 types of narcotics, firearms, and ammunition.
Zoe just finished her training, and now she spends her time patrolling campuses throughout the Folsom Cordova School District.
In light of the Parkland incident, we felt that there might be something else that we could do to promote more campus safety
giving students a little peace of mind in a time when school safety is on many minds.
We do have an open campus. It is easy to get on and off, and so having a dog here I think it'll be great to help with the security of just the whole school.
To be able to have, her detection skills is just, like I said, another proactive measure where we're not always reacting to something. We're able to get ahead of things and make sure that, our staff feels supported.
But Zoe's job isn't all business. She also provides a friendly face to make students more comfortable interacting with police.
It's an icebreaker between law enforcement and the kids. The kids really like the dog, especially her, because she's basically like a stuffed animal with a heartbeat.
Zoe quickly becoming the most popular girl on campus.
I think it'll bring a good morale with just everyone in school, especially the ladies in school, because they love dogs.
So popular, the student body president is already talking about putting her in the yearbook. And if you're wondering whether Zoe likes her new job, well, see for yourself.
So Zoe, do you like being the new big dog on campus? I think she does.
In Rancho Cordova, Olivia DeGeneiro, Fox 40 News.
Disney, trying to make the happiest place on earth the best place to work. The company offering to pay tuition for hourly cast members.
I think that has a pretty strong pull for a lot of people, because that's a lot of money, that's a lot of time.
Everybody's coming out of school and having huge loans and not being able to pay it off, so over time, this is just a fantastic thing.
Disney says more than 80,000 of its employees will be eligible. The program, called Disney Aspire, will allow them to pursue their high school equivalency, college or master's degrees, English language learning, and vocational training. The company says cast members get to choose what classes they want to take, even if it doesn't line up with their job at Disney.
Number one, everybody got a big corporate tax cut, so they really have the funds. But it really it separates one company from the next. It shows that they really do care about people that work there, and enables them potentially to keep these people for a long time.
Other big companies are already doing something similar. Walmart announced it would take care of tuition bills for employees back in May.
They don't have to do it, but definitely it's smart. When you have unemployment at 4%, and tougher to find people, incentives do have to go up, and this is a darn good incentive, especially for hourly workers that tend to be of that age where they're going around college.
I'm a recovering addict. Found out that I was pregnant, and I wanted to go to rehab and get clean for my daughter.
For 21-year-old Brianna, unfortunately, the inspiration to turn her life around, it met an immediate and tragic end.
She lived for 2 hours and then she passed away.
Most young people expect that they're going to have to deal with the costs associated with burying an older loved one. But when you're talking about burying a child, your child, that's something that none of us expect to do.
The nurses and my mom called around and found Trish, and she helped me. I was able to get her own grave.
Trish is Patricia Quinn, and helping people like Brianna was inspired by things that she saw in her daily business life.
My husband and I had a funeral home in an economically challenged area of the city, and we were quite often being asked for help.
Seeing parents lose their children for any reason is hard, but not being able to give them a proper burial, that was too much for Trish.
No matter what their financial situation is, the point where someone loses a child, they may not be able to come up with that kind of money right then and there.
And that's what led her to start Final Farewell. They pay the costs associated with funerals and burials, and it's making a huge difference.
It's 12 years that I've been doing it, and over 500 families all across the United States.
But Trish needs our help. She can only help as many families as Final Farewell can afford through donations, and apparently it's hard getting people to understand the importance of giving.
Nobody wants to believe a child passes. That's the furthest thing from their mind. They want to, they want to give to the cure for leukemia. Of course, everybody does. But if people weren't dying, we wouldn't need a cure.
Let's go back to Brianna. Although doctors say her baby Serenity's death had nothing to do with her previous drug use, having a place to remember her, that inspires.
She was everything to me, and I wish that she was here, but she's my motivation to stay clean. I want to continue to do that for her every day.
And for Trish, knowing that she helped, that's what inspires.
I just love doing it. I don't know why.
Bill Anderson, Fox News.
All right, guys, we're back in the newsroom here on this Thursday, August 23rd. Thanks for joining us on the stream today. Hey, yesterday, President Trump honored posthumously. He awarded the Medal of Honor, the nation's highest military award, to Air Force Sergeant John Chapman. He died at the age of 36 in 2002 in Afghanistan. He's actually only the 19th ever airman to receive the nation's highest military honor since the Air Force was created in 1947. So it really was an amazing thing. Today, they honored him with a ceremony at the Pentagon. If you've ever seen one of these are kind of really interesting and really cool to see just these high respects being paid to this Air Force sergeant. Again, name is John Chapman. He died at 36 way back in 2002. So that was this week, and this morning was that ceremony. He was inducted into the Hall of Heroes at the Pentagon. We have a clip of some of that video from this morning. Of course, Secretary of Defense James Mattis was there presiding over that, and his heroic actions actually was the first time someone received that award for action since the Vietnam War, who was in the Air Force. So without further ado, check out this video from this morning at the Pentagon.
Song is a series of questions. Can you see our flag as the dawn is breaking? It was 1814, and Francis Scott Key, an American lawyer, was aboard the flagship of the British fleet in Baltimore Harbor as the British relentlessly pummeled Fort McHenry. It was a tough time in our history. Washington, D.C., the capital of this young republic, had been sacked by the British a few weeks before. The Capitol had been set aflame, and the White House was evacuated. That first verse ends with a question for us, a challenge. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave? Or the land of the free and the home of the brave? Would our nation endure? Would we be protected by the brave? Would we be able to produce the men and women it takes who swallow fear, who summon bravery, and act to protect freedom and to protect each other? Today we honor John Chapman, who by his actions answered the question in our national anthem for his generation. He will forever be in our Hall of Heroes as one of America's bravest. When Neil Roberts was knocked off the back of his helicopter on March 4th, 2002, John knew his only acceptable option was to go back for Neil. He knew they were flying into a hornet's nest, and he did it anyway. When the helicopter landed, John immediately moved toward the enemy, uphill, through knee-deep snow, under heavy fire. He knew what he was facing, and he did it anyway. He charged an enemy bunker, cleared it, exposed himself to attack, going after another bunker, was hit and knocked unconscious. When he regained consciousness, he knew he had to fight on, and he certainly knew the odds. And he did it anyway. Dawn was breaking over Takur Ghar when the helicopter sent to rescue the team was about to be attacked by a fighter with a rocket-propelled grenade. John knew he had to try to stop him. He was alone, outgunned, and he did it anyway. We could see the rocket's red glare, not from a ship in the harbor, but from the eyes of a Predator drone arching overhead. To be sure, John's bravery that day wasn't some fluke. He had prepared himself for that day. Many of you in this room helped to train him for that day. One of John's instructors recalled Sergeant Chapman's time at the Combat Control School, one of the more grueling of Air Force training programs. In the Special Tactics training pipeline, about 85% wash out. And his instructor recalls a smirk on Sergeant Chapman's face during training, as if the training was too easy for him. And his instructor says, it was too easy for John. John Chapman never talked about how good he was at what he did. He didn't have to. You know, we don't often sing the three final verses in our national anthem. In the final one, Francis Scott Key answers his own question with something of a prayer that praises the power that hath made and preserves us a nation. The Star-Spangled Banner in triumph shall wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave. For his generation of Americans, John Chapman was the answer to that lingering question. Our nation endures and continues to be the land of the free because of brave men, because of John Chapman.
General Goldfein, Chief Wright, and Miss Valerie Nessel, the widow of Technical Sergeant John A. Chapman, will now join Secretary Wilson on stage for the induction ceremony. Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated during the presentations. The President of the United States of America, authorized by Act of Congress, March 3, 1863, has awarded in the name of the Congress the Medal of Honor to Technical Sergeant John A. Chapman for conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of life above and beyond the call of duty. Technical Sergeant John A. Chapman distinguished himself by extraordinary heroism as a combat controller attached to a Navy sea, air, and land team conducting reconnaissance operations in Takur Ghar, Afghanistan on 4 March 2002. During insertion, the team's helicopter was ambushed, causing a teammate to fall into a hornet's nest of enemy below. Sergeant Chapman and the SEALs voluntarily reinserted onto a snow-capped mountain into the heart of a known enemy stronghold to rescue one of their own. Sergeant Chapman immediately engaged, moving in the direction of the closest enemy position despite coming under heavy fire from multiple directions. He charged an enemy bunker up a 15-degree grade in thigh-deep snow directly into the hostile fire. Upon reaching the bunker, Sergeant Chapman assaulted through and cleared the position, killing all enemy occupants. With complete disregard for his own life, Sergeant Chapman deliberately moved from cover and exposed himself once again to intense enemy fire to attack a second bunker with an emplaced machine gun that was firing on the team. Emerging from the bunker less than 12 meters from the enemy and directly in the line of fire, Sergeant Chapman attacked the machine gun emplacement from an exposed position. During this assault, Sergeant Chapman was struck and injured by enemy fire. Despite severe wounds, he continued to fight relentlessly, sustaining a violent engagement with multiple enemy personnel before paying the ultimate sacrifice. In the conduct of these heroic actions, Sergeant Chapman is credited with saving the lives of his teammates. By his courageous actions and extraordinary valor at the cost of his own life, Technical Sergeant Chapman upheld the highest traditions of military service and reflected great credit upon himself and the United States Air Force. At this time, the Medal of Honor flag will be presented to Ms. Valerie Nessel. On 23 October 2002, Public Law 107-248, Section 8143, established the Medal of Honor flag to recognize service members who have distinguished themselves by gallantry in action above and beyond the call of duty. The Medal of Honor flag commemorates the sacrifice and blood shed for our freedoms and gives emphasis to the Medal of Honor being the highest award for valor by an individual serving in the armed forces of the United States. The light blue color with gold fringe bearing 13 white stars are adapted from the Medal of Honor ribbon. Ladies and gentlemen, the Medal of Honor plaque will now be unveiled, inducting Technical Sergeant Chapman into the Hall of Heroes. Ladies and gentlemen, Sergeant Chapman's mother, Mrs. Teresa Chapman, and his sister, Mrs. Lori Longfritz.
Good morning, Madam Secretary, General Goldfein, Chief Wright, and all you wonderful people from the Air Force, ladies and gentlemen, all of Johnny's friends. I didn't prepare a speech because I knew I would get like this, the words wouldn't come out. I could go on here and tell you all kinds of stories about John, but I don't have to. I think you already know what he was like. And I'm ever so grateful for those who worked so hard to make this possible. I can't tell you how much it means to me and my family. Thank you so much.
I prepared a few just little notes just to kind of keep me moving along. I thought I would keep it short, but then I was told that I have all the time in the world. So how much time do you guys have? Because when I'm talking about John, I can talk for 5 minutes or 5 hours, or 5 days if you give it to me. Pardon?
No, I see your face.
First, I would like to thank all of you for coming. I'm afraid that I'm going to forget someone. I'm afraid that I'm going to forget to thank someone who requires, who needs, who deserves to be thanked. So I think I'm just going to leave it at a blanket thank you for being here. But I guess I'm not going to leave it there, because there are certain people who I want to thank. Former Secretary of the Air Force, Deborah James, for asking the question, what does it take for an airman to receive the Medal of Honor? I would like to thank all the people who worked to find that answer for her, including Wolf. Where's Wolf? Mike Martin, General Goldfein. Where is Mike Wendelkin? Thank you, Mike. Every single one of you are very humble. I thank you, and you say, I didn't really do anything. You have done a lot. I want to thank everyone else who's here supporting us and supporting John, wanting to honor him. For those of you who want to hear me talk for days about John, see me later. I can. When I think back about growing up with John, there are 4 of us kids, but we were so close in age that it feels like it's always been the 4 of us. All for one, one for all. We fought, we laughed, we cried, always together. Or, well, maybe sometimes it was the boys against the girls, or the oldest and the youngest against the middle kids, but we always came together when it was needed. Growing up with Kevin and John and Tammy was wonderful. Growing up in Windsor Locks is a wonderful little town that's all about family. But you guys came here to listen, to hear about John, so I'll move on from that. There's this quote in a book, To Kill a Mockingbird. You can choose your friends, but you can't choose your family. Well, that couldn't be further from the truth. John chose all of his family, and that includes people who are not blood related. Starting as a child, he chose his friends well. He was friendly with everyone, but he was very careful in choosing those who he brought into his inner circle. And each one of those people that he brought in helped form him. He had the beginnings of it, but every person that came into his life affected him as he affected them. As he grew older, high school, going into the military, he did the same. He was respectful of everyone, I think. Maybe some people would have something to say about that, but the people he chose to keep close to him are very special people. One second. He chose Valerie. He wanted her. He made that choice, and it was a wonderful choice. He and Valerie together chose to have Madison and Brianna. He loved all 3 of them more than anything. There's a saying, my son John went to Jim Kelly's football camp a couple years ago. Go Bills. And Jim Kelly is all about respect, calling people yes sir, no ma'am. And every year he has a saying on the back of the shirts that get handed out. And the year that John went, it said, "Show me your friends and I'll show you your future." And that's true, especially of John, my brother John. Look at his friends. Look at the family that he chose. And you can see how he was the person that who did what he did on that mountain. John was the type of person from the time he was a little boy till the time he died to do the right thing because it was the right thing, even if no one was watching. He wasn't perfect. He was a stinker. He was a little mischievous. He was a very calculated risk taker. If he would kind of weigh the odds, if I do this, what's the worst that could happen? I can handle that, I'm going to do it. And he would. And half the time he got away with it. I'll tell you one story. It's a quick one. And this was, Mom would send him to his room if he did something wrong. And I think this only happened a couple of times. But his room had a lower window than the rest than my sister and I. So he'd get sent to his room. Mom would go about her business. John would climb out the window and go play in the neighborhood. He'd climb back in time. I don't know how he knew, but he never got caught. If I got out, I'd get caught in 5 minutes. But he never got caught. And so, yeah, he weighed the risk. What's the worst he could have happen to him? Get stuck in his room? I mean, John had an uncanny way of making anyone, if he met you for 5 minutes or he knew you for a lifetime, if you were with him, in front of him, next to him, he made you feel like you were the most important person at that moment in time to him. It was uncanny. My son played football. He had a favorite coach last year that he's been kept in contact with. Coach Thompson allowed him to practice with them to get ready for junior high football. John told Coach Thompson about his uncle. Then Coach Thompson told his team about John Chapman. And he said, after telling the brief story, he said that just as John Chapman did, his team needs to play to the whistle. John played to the whistle every time, especially on March 4th, 2002. I want to read a quote that my husband Kenny told me about. I'm bringing in another Bills reference, I'm sorry. Marv Levy had heard this. It's a very long ballad, a ballad of Sir Andrew Barton, a Scottish sailor from Leith. I'm assuming that's Leith, Scotland. This is a part of the poem that struck him, and I believe it really fits here also. Let me put my glasses on. Fight on, my men. I am hurt, but I am not slain. I'll lay me down and bleed a while, and then I'll rise and fight again. And that's exactly what John did on that day. In that last hour of John's life on that mountain, people can say, well, he had no choice, he had to fight. Yeah, he did have to fight. It was fight or die. But he took that fight to them. He owned that fight. He didn't just sit back and wait for something to help him. He helped himself. He brought it to them. And there was no way that he was going to retreat. He did it his way, the way he lived his life from the time he was small to the time he died. He lived his life his way, and he fought that fight his way. And I couldn't be happier and more proud of him. I think I can't talk anymore.
Ladies and gentlemen, the men and women of the United States Air Force are proud to induct Technical Sergeant Chapman into the Hall of Heroes. A reception will follow in the hallway at the entrance of the auditorium. Please remain standing for the playing of the Air Force song. This concludes today's ceremony. Thank you for attending, and we wish you a pleasant day.
President. It was executive. Representative.
Again, back in the newsroom here, guys, at Fox 5 DC. Thanks for joining us on the stream. Hey, that ceremony took place this morning at the Pentagon honoring Air Force Commander, Sergeant Commander John Chapman. Really a beautiful ceremony there with his mother and sister speaking about his life and his work in the Air Force. Hey, later on today, actually, guys, in this same hour, in about 20 or 25 minutes, we are supposed to be getting some live video of the Vice President Pence, is down at Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas, and he's going to be delivering some remarks on the Trump administration's new, or sort of newly to be construed, Space Force. So that should be some interesting stuff. We just had a little bit of live video coming in of the Vice President touring the Space Center. Unfortunately, that has dropped for us, so we'll show you that a little bit later on today. But another little snippet from this morning out of the State Department. State Department Secretary Mike Pompeo had a few words for a crowd, and this is what he had to say.
I'm excited to announce this morning that Steve Biegun is joining our team as the Special Representative for North Korea. Steve will direct U.S. policy towards North Korea and lead our efforts to achieve President Trump's goal of the final fully verified denuclearization of North Korea, as agreed to by Chairman Kim Jong-un. It's a very timely moment for Steve to join the team and come on board. He and I will be traveling to North Korea next week to make further diplomatic progress towards our objective. Steve is taking the reins of a great team effort. The State Department has already done excellent work in implementing and sustaining the pressure campaign, putting together the first ever leader-level summit in Singapore, and laying the groundwork to hold North Korea accountable to the promises that Chairman Kim has made. As the special representative, Steve will lead negotiations and spearhead diplomatic efforts with our allies and partners. Steve has had extensive career in foreign policy and in tough negotiating settings as well. He comes to us from his position as the Vice President of International Government Affairs for the Ford Motor Company. In this job, he closely engaged foreign governments to advance Ford's goals all around the world. He will now employ that same skill and dedication on behalf of the American people to make sure that their interests are well served in respect to North Korea. Steve also spent nearly 2 decades doing foreign policy work on Capitol Hill and in the executive branch. His positions have included National Security Advisor to former Senate Majority Leader Senator Bill Frist. He was the Executive Secretary at the National Security Council under President George W. Bush, and the Chief of Staff at the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Using diplomacy to resolve the North Korean security threat once and for all remains one of President Trump's greatest priorities, and Steve is eminently qualified for the task and clear-eyed in the challenge before us. I'm fully confident that he will be able to lead our mission in ensuring a secure future for the American people, and we hope a far brighter future for the people of North Korea. And now I'd like to invite our new Special Representative for North Korea, Steve Biegun, to say a few words.
Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary. And I want to start by thanking you and the President for having given me an incredible opportunity to once again serve our great nation. I fully understand the importance of this job, the President, you, and the American people, and what you expect from all of us in achieving a more peaceful world. The issues are tough, and they will be tough to resolve. But the President has created an opening, and it's one that we must take by seizing every possible opportunity to realize the vision for a peaceful future for the people of North Korea. This begins with the final, fully verified denuclearization of North Korea as agreed by Chairman Kim Jong-un at the summit with President Trump in Singapore. I will work closely with my colleagues here at the State Department and throughout the U.S. government, as well as our allies and partners around the world, to achieve our shared goal of a safer and more peaceful world. Once again, I'm honored and grateful for this opportunity, and I look forward to faithfully representing the United States of America. Mr. Secretary, I will give you and the American people my very best. Thank you.
Thank you all.
So some brief words there from the Pentagon Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, making an announcement there to the press. We are now seeing some live video coming in from Houston, though. Check out this. This is the Vice President touring what seems to be a really cool thing at the Space Center in Houston. You can see sort of all their monitors. We just had a vision of another room with sort of a long pool where I believe some of the astronauts do some of their practice stuff. So let's bring up the sound here and see what Vice President Pence is looking into here.
So we can look at what's going on underwater here. We have like a...
And did you grab your rent? I got my rent, yep. Okay, I'm getting on your way then. I'm heading out more.
So, I don't know if you know Nicole Mann and Victor Glover. They're also part of the commercial crew project. Yeah. They're underwater today. Okay. Victor's with the yellow umbilical. Nicole is over here on the right screen with the gray umbilical. They're practicing one of the standard tasks that we'll have to know how to do just in case while we're up there for a period of time a pump fails, we have to go out and change it. So that's what they're practicing. As, like I mentioned on the deck, you could see all of the divers around them also. They're safety divers as well as divers who make sure that you feel like you're neutrally buoyant. So you don't even think about going upside down. The divers are there to change the weights on your suit so that it definitely feels like you're in space. And we'll take a look, I think, at the side here so you can sort of see the whole pool of how big the space station is. So you have to follow the umbilicals. So you see how the gray one goes down, the yellow one goes down, they're right there. This pool isn't even big enough to hold the whole space station. So this is just the core piece here in the center of the U.S. lab and the node 2 and the truss on top. This whole piece of the truss here, there's two of them. One would stick on the end that way, one would stick on the end this way. So the space station is huge. You've seen pictures of it. I think people don't have a real appreciation of how big it actually is. And so when you're out doing a spacewalk, you're pretty far away from the center of the activity. You're way out on the end of the truss, and that's where those guys are at the end of the truss.
All right, looks like we had just a limited video there of that tour. It's kind of in and out now, but we know that the Vice President will be speaking in just a few moments here. It's coming up on the stream, Vice President Pence talking about the Space Force and the new sort of agency that is to be developed under the Trump administration. We can see the cameras right here inside that arena where he'll be speaking on behalf of NASA. And then later also coming up shortly, this is a live camera over at, I believe, FEMA headquarters, yep, in Washington, D.C. right here. And my guess is they'll be talking about some emergency recovery action as to do with hurricanes or whatever other things are coming up on our radar. We know that the big hurricane out near Hawaii is threatening people traveling there, and there are some travelers who have been sort of questioning whether or not they should travel out there. So possibly we'll get some more word on what that's going to entail for Hawaii, and then other disaster relief as well. So more from FEMA coming up soon, and then also Vice President's remarks coming up shortly as well. We'll take that right when it begins. But let's start you off with some of the top stories of the day, including this Hawaii story. Where's that hurricane at, and what is it going to do in regards to affecting travelers this August? Check it out.
More and more worrisome in terms of the direction of Hurricane Lane.
The state of Hawaii is bracing for impact as a life-threatening hurricane approaches, sending some fleeing for the mainland.
But I'm really relieved to get out of there.
Kelsey Brown is a meteorologist for the U.S. Air Force. She's stationed at Pearl Harbor and decided to get out.
As far as like stores, everything was completely wiped out. We had like no water. Gas stations were crazy. We couldn't get any gas. Like lines were like miles down the road. Just chaotic.
With a little help from Mom and over $1,000 later, Kelsey was on a first-class flight back to LAX.
It feels good. She's my baby. I'm happy that she's home.
Peter and Teresa Corral had a similar idea. They decided to cut their Oahu vacation short ahead of the storm.
We have a house in Cabo, so we know what hurricanes do, so we wanted to get out of there before it came in.
Last night, it seemed like everyone hit the stores. Generators were gone, shelves were cleared out, yeah.
And then there's this family. They came all the way from Germany for a dream trip to Hawaii, a trip that won't be happening.
Now we go to the Hawaiian Airlines and want to cancel it because the hurricane, and they don't cancel it. We want to get the money back for 3 flights.
They say Hawaiian Airlines offered to reschedule them in September, But they'll be back in Germany by then, and their $1,700 is now down the drain.
Now we go back to the Marriott Hotel, and we are very crying, but the children are crying.
There were also people flying to Hawaii Wednesday night. One of them was Oahu resident Henry McNamara.
Not too concerned yet tonight because I'll probably get in there safe, but definitely in the coming days, it'll definitely be a pretty dangerous hurricane that's coming pretty close.
And then there's Rebecca Romero.
I'm feeling really excited to take a vacation to Hawaii, all paid by my parents.
She too was flying out Wednesday night with a friend, and she's telling Hurricane Lane to bring it on. Any second thoughts about still going?
Oh no, this is gonna be awesome. I'm gonna go out on the beach and I'm gonna take my camera right in the eye of the storm.
In a category 4? Are you crazy?
Yes, she doesn't understand what's happening.
The news has become more and more worrisome in terms of the direction of Hurricane Lane.
The state of Hawaii is...
The news has become more and more worrisome in terms of the direction.
We'll get started momentarily. Thank you again.
So Martine's last day is, I heard Friday. And you guys, 6 openings or 8? No, I don't exactly know. Something, I don't know. I mean, I'll believe it when I see 6 people show up. You know what I mean? And it took, I know it took, I think almost a year to fill 2 positions. So I don't know.
You know, squeeze on by you, come on through. All right, folks, we ready to go? Okay. Obviously, Hurricane Lane is a very dangerous storm that is encroaching on the state of Hawaii. There's a lot of uncertainty with this forecast. I've watched a lot of forecasts in my life, and the thing about it is that anytime you see a 90-degree turn to the west over the next 48 to 72 hours, there's a lot of uncertainty. What is for sure, though, is that Hawaii is going to be impacted by Hurricane Lane. The question is how bad. Right now, this system is really setting up to be a significant rain event, torrential rains. Forecasters are predicting over 30 inches in some parts. You could see higher amounts isolated. And we're extremely concerned about the potentials for inland flooding, landslides occurring, and damage to the transportation communications infrastructure. And we are taking all the precautions that we can here at FEMA to help our state and local partners in Hawaii pre-position and ready to support all life safety and life-sustaining actions that may be needed as the storm approaches. The other issue that we're going to see is that this is not just going to be over in the next 24 hours. This system is going to be with us for the next 4 or 5 days, continuing to bring winds to the island, to bring large surf, as well as the torrential rains that we've talked about. So what are we focused on? Again, life safety. Obviously, right now we're asking citizens to please heed all warnings that local and state officials have been pushing out. It's incredibly important that you do this now, as we're already seeing large rainfall amounts occurring on the Big Island in Hawaii County. I think some of the estimates have been anywhere between 10 and 12 inches already, and that's just going to continue. So the preparations need to be made by citizens in Hawaii. Again, heed all warnings, local warnings that are put out by them. In a minute, we'll go to our Red Cross, our partners at Red Cross here to talk about the sheltering. But FEMA, has been hyper-focused on making sure that we're properly set up to support food, water, as well when it comes to commodities. Unfortunately, Hawaii has been through it here most recently with not only the active volcano, but we also saw a flood disaster in April. And then with the threat that Hurricane Hector provided well over a week ago, we not only have a solid force staff laydown within the state that's been actively supporting the governor as well as the local governments, but we continue to, we were pushing commodities for hurricane in anticipation of Hurricane Hector, and we continue to support commodities into the island. But what's different and what we learned from 2017 that's already being incorporated in real time for this event is that, most importantly, we've got strong communication with our private sector partners. We've been working with the major grocer wholesalers that are there that support the island. And the main goal is to make sure that they can continue to provide services regardless of the hit. And if things shut down, then they use, we've got our emergency commodities ready to go. Great communication with Governor Ige. Spoke with him late last night. He had requested an emergency declaration that the president swiftly approved and pushed forward on, showing our full force and support to the governor. And we will continue to work forward. Today, we have several partners here. Again, emergency management, proper disaster response and recovery is all about unity of effort and partnership. It's not just one agency that's responsible for everything. And the bottom line is that we rely not only on our federal government partners, but we rely on great communication and coordination down through all the way down to the citizen. So the bottom line is I want to push this over right now to some of our other partners, and specifically with the National Weather Service, Steve Goldstein from the National Weather Service, to give us an update.
Okay, the latest advisory, Hurricane Lane was still a Category 4 hurricane with maximum winds of 130 miles per hour. It was located 210 miles south of Kona, Hawaii, and 305 miles south of Honolulu, Hawaii. It is expected to turn more northerly and take more of a north to northwest track over the next 24 to 36 hours, after which it will take a west turn and move out into sea. In doing this, it will pass very close to the Hawaiian Islands and is expected to have major impact. You do not need a direct strike to have major impacts from a hurricane this strong. There'll be a lot of moisture over the Hawaiian Islands for the next several days. 10 to 20 inches of rainfall is forecast, and over 30 inches of rain is possible, especially in the steep terrain and the mountains. This will likely flood roadways, possibly wash out bridges, and cause evacuations and necessitate water rescues. Rivers and tributaries could overflow their banks. Mudslides, rock slides, and debris flows will be possible in the mountainous steep terrain. In addition to this, tropical storm force winds are expected to overspread the Hawaiian Islands throughout the day today, possibly reaching hurricane force late tonight into tomorrow, depending upon the exact track of the storm. Dangerous surf and swell, 10 to 20 feet, expected along south and west-facing beaches. And the storm surge, especially around the time of high tide, which is significant because we are in a full moon, will be 2 to 4 feet above the normal tide levels, and that could cause additional problems. That will conclude my portion of the weather briefing.
Thank you, Steve. Next, I'm going to turn it over to our partners at the U.S. Coast Guard. We have Rear Admiral Meredith Austin with us today. Obviously, one of the greatest concerns that we have is how the ports and the waterways are going to be impacted within the state, but also the Coast Guard provides tremendous capability when it comes to search and rescue. So in addition to the Coast Guard assets, and I'm going to turn it over here to the Rear Admiral here in a second, we've also deployed urban search and rescue teams to the island, to all 4 counties, to be ready to support any swift water rescues that may occur as a result of this system. So, ma'am.
Good afternoon. The safety of the people in Hawaii, as well as our Coast Guard members and their families, are the priority right now. We're working closely with our partners in FEMA, the Army Corps of Engineers, other federal, state, and local agencies in preparing for the impacts of the storm. Our operational commanders in our Pacific area of operations have pre-positioned our assets, our aircraft, our boats, our people, to be ready to hunker down and then pass behind the storm to be able to respond as soon as it's safe to do so. And we urge the people that are in Hawaii right now to heed all the warnings, stay off the beach right now, stay out of the water, and evacuate if told to do so. Thank you.
All right, next, again, the Department of Defense provides tremendous support to the National Response Framework and our ability to properly respond and recover. And today we have Bob Salasese today with us, who is the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Civil Authorities. So thank you, Bob.
Thanks, Brock. The leadership of the department, as you can imagine, is very focused on this. In particular, Secretary Mattis and Admiral Davidson, who's the commander of Indo-PACOM. They've been monitoring the storm very closely. They're also taking necessary action now to protect the safety and well-being of our military community. They're also working to ensure the readiness of our U.S. military in the region. They're also posturing military capability to provide immediate support for life-saving and life-sustaining capability. The department has significant military capability in Hawaii. We have over 57,000 military members that reside in Hawaii. The department works very closely with Administrator Long and the FEMA team on a regular basis. We're well connected and communicating daily. Our military in Hawaii will be ready to provide search and rescue, rotary wing support, damage assessment, and transportation and logistics and medical support. Along with our military, we have U.S. Transcom, which will provide strategic and maritime lift. We have the Defense Logistics Agency, which has tremendous logistics capability to provide meals, fuel, and those types of things. And then, of course, we have the Corps of Engineers, which will provide emergency power, and you'll hear from them in a second. Our National Guard is well prepared in Hawaii, working with the Governor Ige too, and the department looks forward to working very closely again with Administrator Long. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I'm going to turn it over to our partners over at the American Red Cross, Brad Kaiserman, who's the Vice President for Disaster Operations for the American Red Cross, a very good partner of ours. Obviously, there's a lot of questions about sheltering, so I want, Brad, if you could come in and brief on shelters.
Absolutely, sir. Thank you. Good afternoon. First of all, I want to just reiterate a point that the administrator made. Disaster response is a team sport. And on that team is every level of government, the private sector, the nonprofit community, and the impacted communities themselves. And we all come together to respond and recover from a disaster. It's important to remember that. Everyone's responsible for playing their part. This team has had a lot of experience between floods in Hawaii earlier this year, the Kilauea volcano. The team in Hawaii and the team that supports Hawaii has a lot of experience right now. Shelters in Hawaii are a critical piece. As the storm approaches, the counties in Hawaii are opening evacuation centers. Those evacuation centers are intended for short stays. Their purpose is to allow people to ride out the storm, and then after the storm passes, the folks who can go home do, and the folks who can't are transitioned into emergency shelters, also run by the counties in Hawaii. The American Red Cross supports these shelters by providing shelter staff, shelter supplies, and services like mental health services, healthcare services, reunification, spiritual care, just to name a few. There are many volunteer organizations responsible and involved in disaster response. I want to highlight the work of the Salvation Army in Hawaii with their 18,000 volunteers, kitchens and food supplies and stores that allow them to participate very actively and prominently in disaster feeding. Just one example of partners working together. Last night in Hawaii, there were 16 evacuation centers open with 283 people across the impacted counties. We expect another 19 centers to be open today. Red Cross will be working with the counties to staff all of those centers. Folks who are going to go to those centers are encouraged to bring supplies and bedding supplies, health supplies, again, short-term stay as the storm passes by. We will assess damage with our partners very quickly in the aftermath of the storm, and then working with the counties, we'll support the opening of emergency shelters that have those wraparound services based on where the damage is and where people have needs. And I'll just conclude with this. Somebody once told me it wasn't raining when Noah built the ark. And so what that means is readiness is important. Readiness to make sure that we can fulfill our responsibilities under the critical infrastructure lifelines the administrator mentioned is critically important. And the state of Hawaii, the counties in Hawaii, and all of their partners have been planning for this type of event now for years. This would be the first landfall in a long, long time. If it happens as a landfall, whether it makes landfall or not, it is a dangerous event, and we are ready for it. Sir, thank you, sir.
Right.
Yes, sir.
Next, we're all concerned about the impact to the power grid there in Hawaii. We learned a lot in 2017, obviously. So part of it when we concentrate on the critical lifelines and specifically energy, power, and fuel, we've already pushed forward great communication with HECO, which is the power company, the privately owned power company that supports all energy restoration on Hawaii. And we're ready to go with our friends at the Army Corps of Engineers to be able to backfill their support their mutual aid when it comes to getting their mutual aid teams into the islands. That's something that we're ready to go and stand by. Army Corps of Engineers provides amazing support for emergency power as well when it comes to generators. And then we have a focus on, once we see what the impacts are, where we want to put those generators. And typically with an island community, what we learned last year is that it's very important for the generators to be ready to go to support not only our hospitals and medical systems, but also the water systems, so that we can alleviate the need to bring in water via aircraft and ships. We want to be able to turn the water system back on as quickly as we can. So with that, I want to bring up Major General Scott Spellman. Thank you.
Thanks, sir. Thanks, sir. Again, my name is Major General Scott Spellman. I'm the Deputy Commanding General for Civil Works and Emergency Operations at the Army Corps of Engineers. I will tell you that under FEMA and our own internal authorities that we are ready to respond to the impacts of Hurricane Lane to assist the people of Hawaii. We have forward positioned our temporary power, our debris, and our temporary roofing teams, along with their associated contractors, so that we are ready to move forward if and when requested. As Admiral Austin also told you, we remain very, very closely in close contact with the Coast Guard to provide our survey capabilities to assist in port opening activities if and when they are needed. And sir, thanks again.
Okay. Thank you.
Well, FEMA is putting in place their emergency plan for Hawaii as Hawaii braces for Hurricane Lane. And you can see this is live right here in D.C. But as this is happening right down in Houston, let's jump down there. The NASA administrator is up at the podium ready to introduce Vice President Pence, who will be speaking about the Space Force down there at NASA Johnson Space Center. Let's take a look and jump down to Houston.
And he put in charge of the National Space Council Vice President Mike Pence. And in so doing, he created an entity that looks at the entire American space enterprise, not just NASA, not just the Department of Defense, not just Homeland Security, not just the intelligence community, not transportation, not just commerce, but every part of the federal government that touches space. And of course, NASA is a piece of that, a big piece of that. He put as the executive secretary of the National Space Council a gentleman named Scott Pace, who is another good friend of mine and a mentor. And Scott Pace has been working on space issues his entire adult life. And of course, as the executive secretary of the National Space Council, he's been doing amazing work. And on the airplane on the way here on Air Force Two, and as I was talking to him and we're discussing future space policy directives that we anticipate initiating and that we anticipate the president signing, he and I had the opportunity to talk about how it is that this National Space Council is so effective and all the great things they've already done and all of the things we want to do. And Scott Pace said this to me. He said, Jim, here's why it's effective. Because this has been an organization that existed in the past and it wasn't effective. It was terminated and then it came back and now it's really doing amazing things for the American space enterprise. And this is what Scott Pace said to me. He said, Jim, the reason it's effective now is because the vice president really cares. The chairman of the National Space Council really cares. And he's putting not just words into it, but he's putting action into it. And of course, NASA is a great beneficiary of that, not just because of the administration, but the policies that are getting put into place and the bipartisan support that we have from members of Congress and the Senate. So we are in an amazing good place. And without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce to you the Vice President of the United States, Mike Pence.
There she stood in the street, smiling from her head to her feet. I said, hey, what is this?
Well, thank you, Administrator Bridenstine, to the members of Congress who are here, Director Geyer, to all our distinguished guests, including the Chief of the Astronaut Office, Pat Forrester, and 9 members of the Astronaut Corps who are with us today, to all the men and women of NASA who are here in this hall and watching around the country, men and women who push the boundaries of human knowledge for the benefit of all. It is my great honor to be here at the home of human spaceflight, the Johnson Space Center. So proud of you. It's great to be back. And before I begin, let me bring greetings from a great champion of American leadership at home and in the boundless expanse of space. I bring greetings from the 45th President of the United States, President Donald Trump. Really is an honor to be with you today. At such a time as this in the life of our space program and in the life of our nation. Thanks to President Trump's vision and decisive action with strong support from our partners in Congress, and thanks to the pioneering work and courage of the innovators and astronauts represented here, past, present, and future, and because of the enduring commitment of the Johnson Space Center and NASA, America is leading in space once again. Good. And we're grateful to all of you. Let me begin today as well by saying how grateful we are for our NASA Administrator, Jim Bridenstine. He served as a Lieutenant Commander of the United States Navy. He served in the Congress, and now he is leading NASA with distinction at the dawn of a renewed age of human space exploration led by the United States of America. Jim, thank you for your leadership. Great job. And I also want to thank the still kind of new director here at Johnson Space Center, Mark Geyer, recipient of NASA's Distinguished Service Medal. His career here has actually spanned more than 3 decades. And I couldn't be more impressed with the job that Mark Geyer is doing, or the fact that he's a graduate of Purdue University. Join me in thanking Mark. Stand up. Stand up. Take a bow. I also want to thank a few other people before we get going. I want to acknowledge your 2 senators who are both champions of this space program. I know they're not with us today. They're working on Capitol Hill, but join me in thanking Senator John Cornyn and Senator Ted Cruz. They fight for this space program every day. And I know he got mentioned before, but we actually served together when I was in the Congress, and I just want to give some special recognition to someone who I've known since the first day we met in 2001, has been a passionate champion of NASA and of the Johnson Space Center and of American leadership in space, Congressman John Culberson. It's true. You got to know, Congressman Culberson is not just a congressman from Texas. He's the chairman of the subcommittee that oversees the budget for NASA. And because of President Trump's leadership and vision, and because of the strong support of Congressman Culberson and our bipartisan support in the Congress, President Trump signed the largest budget for NASA since the days of the Apollo program. Thank you, John. Great. We really thank them all. So it's great to be back at the Johnson Space Center. Today I got to look around a little bit, and I was like a kid in a candy store. I'm telling you what, it was amazing. Talking to astronauts training at the Neutral Buoyancy Lab, I looked at some lunar samples. I was told that the samples we were looking at, still encased, haven't been opened since they were gathered nearly a half a century ago. And it was my privilege to wander around this place with a great American. a hero of Apollo 17, and a man that all America is proud of, one of the last two men to walk on the moon. Jack Schmitt, it is always an honor to be with you. Thank you for your leadership. We rode over in my car together, which is kind of cozy, lots of stuff piled in there, and I was just imagining maybe I was in the me and Jack Schmitt in close quarters. Yeah, right. As close as I'll ever get, Jack. Thank you. Thank you for your leadership and your courage and your commitment. A member of the User Advisory Group advising the National Space Council to take NASA to even higher levels. Thank you again, Jack. With the strong support of all these leaders, I'm pleased to report to the whole team here at NASA, President Trump has brought renewed vision and renewed action to America's space program. Last summer, as Jim mentioned, after it had lain dormant for nearly a quarter of a century, President Trump revived the National Space Council and put us all to work. As we speak, the National Space Council, bringing together all different agencies of government that bear on this program and bringing together the best minds in and around American space leadership. We're forming a cohesive and comprehensive strategy for America's space activities. It's my honor to serve as chairman, and we've already forged new partnerships between the federal government, leaders in industry, and academia. We're enacting new space traffic management policies to protect our assets in that crowded realm. We're rolling back stifling red tape so we can tap the bottomless well of American innovation. We're also renewing our national commitment to discovery and to exploration, and to write the next great chapter of our nation's journey into space. That's why last December, 45 years almost to the minute since Jack Schmitt and Gene Cernan landed on the moon, President Donald Trump signed Space Policy Directive 1. It is now the official policy of the United States of America that we will return to the moon, put Americans on Mars, and once again explore the farthest depths of outer space. The President's leadership and all of your great work is the cause of what brings me here today. But this is the mission. This is the future of the Johnson Space Center. For more than 50 years, this storied center has been at the forefront of America's journey to the stars. This is the home of the astronaut corps. And here from the Mission Control Center, you've guided every American crewed space expedition since 1965. The names and the voyages that you directed from this place adorn the mantle of American greatness. Project Gemini, you steered some of our earliest astronauts high above what they called the blue marble into low Earth orbit. In the Apollo program, you navigated the first members of the human family to the moon and back. At this very hour, you walk with our astronauts through their duties as they walk 200 miles above us, orbiting the Earth every 90 minutes on the International Space Station. The Johnson Space Center is a national treasure, and all the men and women who work here are a national asset. I have to tell you, I'm just speaking as a small-town guy from southern Indiana, but I know the American people admire. They admire the work done here, past, present, and they look for even greater things in the future here at Johnson Space Center. And let me say to all of you, and all of those that might be looking on, the most important work and the best days for the Johnson Space Center are yet to come. Count on it. Our administration has laid out a new vision for space. President Trump's vision to push our nation farther, get there faster than ever before, is being implemented even as we speak. And unlike prior administrations, we have a vision with the budget to match. As I mentioned, thanks to Congressman Culberson's leadership and strong bipartisan support in the Congress, President Trump already signed into law historic funding for NASA, and we've also fully funded NASA's most important endeavors from deep space human exploration, America's rocket, the Space Launch System, and the Orion space capsule. These projects, as you all well know, are emblematic of American leadership in the cosmos. The Space Launch System will be the largest and most powerful rocket ever built. It will generate a staggering 11.9 million pounds of thrust and reach speeds of nearly 7 miles per second. And all this force, all this energy will lift American astronauts into space aboard the Orion capsule. I just saw one of those Orion capsules floating out in that big tank. I know we're getting ready to put that thing up in the air. It'll be up before you know it. The next Americans who set foot on the moon will start their journey by stepping through Orion's hatch. This extraordinary spacecraft will one day bridge the gap between our planet and the next. The Orion will be a critical part of the vessel that carries American astronauts to Mars. And you here at the Johnson Space Center will guide these journeys. While our sights are once again set on our lunar neighbor, this time we're not content with just leaving behind footprints, or even to leave it all. This time, the time has come, we really believe, for the United States of America to take what we have learned over these so many decades, put your ingenuity and creativity to work, and establish a permanent presence around and on the moon. We're going to do it. Now, some say that America doesn't need to go back to the moon, that we ought to focus on issues closer to home. That attitude was probably best described in one of my favorite movies called Interstellar. Remember that scene on the front porch? It was an incredible quote. One of the characters in the movie said, and I quote, "We used to look up at the sky and wonder at our place in the stars. Now we just look down and worry about our place in the dirt." That's not how Americans think. Truthfully, that kind of thinking led people in the past to even cancel the Constellation program. That would have put Americans back on the moon by 2020 and set the stage for exploration of Mars and beyond. That decision was a mistake. It said to NASA, it said to our country, to the entire world, that America was no longer serious about human space exploration. We talked about going to Mars, but without the moon as a stepping stone, without stronger commercial partnerships to help us get there, a crude mission to the red planet was not much more than a mirage. But those days are over. America will lead mankind to the stars once again. Yeah. Our administration has restored the moon as the focal point of our national space activities because we recognize its pivotal importance. And that's why, under President Trump's leadership, our administration is swiftly advancing the most important precursor to outposts on the moon and the mission to Mars, the first space station that will orbit our nearest neighbor, the Lunar Orbital Platform. Last year, NASA began to work with American innovators to design this Gateway's unique electrical propulsion system. We're working with the Congress to provide an unprecedented $500 million to move the Lunar Orbital Platform from proposal to production. We're only a few short years away from launching the Gateway's first building blocks into space, turning science fiction into science fact. And our administration is working tirelessly to put an American crew aboard the Lunar Orbital Platform before the end of 2024. Men and women of the Johnson Space Center, it's not a question of if, it's just a question of when. Now, we're on the cusp of a new golden age of exploration. I believe it with all my heart. And we've got the courageous astronauts that are ready to lead us there again. As NASA continues to push back the borders of this still new frontier, we will empower America's private pioneers as well to cultivate the vast expanses that we've already explored. We'll ensure that American security in space is attended to as well. You know, the moon sits at the edge of the known and the unknown, but between here and there are some 240,000 miles. The region between the Earth and the moon is ripe for opportunity, and nowhere is that more apparent than immediately beyond our atmosphere. Low Earth orbit is critical to America's national interests. It holds immense strategic, scientific, and commercial value. And we know this because of your work here at the Johnson Space Center with the International Space Station. You know, ever since Bill Shepard first floated aboard the ISS in the year 2000, there's been a continuous human presence in low Earth orbit. And the results have really been extraordinary. The ISS has conducted groundbreaking research on microgravity, life support systems. It's been a test bed for cutting-edge space technologies and systems, including 3D printers and zero gravity, fostered medical discoveries for cancer and other diseases, and given us new ways to treat our nation's veterans. The International Space Station has spurred unprecedented collaboration between our federal government and a new generation of innovative American companies as well. Let me say this clearly. The International Space Station has been an unqualified success, and the men and women of Johnson Space Center deserve the credit for the history you've made. You do. But like Skylab before it, the ISS, as you all know, has a finite lifetime. With the deadline for direct funding set for 2025, we have to prepare immediately for what comes next. To ensure American leadership in low Earth orbit tomorrow, we are taking action today. In the words of Mission Controller and legendary leader Gene Kranz, we need to be tough and competent to achieve our goals. And together with NASA, we're already developing a comprehensive plan to do just that. The Johnson Space Center knows well the high cost of inaction. The men and women of NASA have always been committed to American leadership in space, but too often our policymakers have failed to match your conviction with action and investment for the future. The last decade is proof. The end of the Space Shuttle program in 2011 left America without a viable human space launch program. While I was a member of Congress, I actually had the opportunity to attend 3 different shuttle launches, some of the most inspiring experience of my little family's lives. Sadly, for more than 7 years, we've been forced to hitch a ride to space. Many Americans don't know that we've actually been forced to pay Russia to carry American astronauts to the International Space Station, and today that cost runs about $82 million per seat. Those days are about to be over. I'm going to make you a promise. Soon and very soon, American astronauts will return to space on American rockets launched from American soil. And when they go, of course, they'll be guided by the dedicated team here at the Johnson Space Center. You know, when we ended the shuttle program, it was more than a loss of momentum, though. It was really a tremendous loss for America's space workforce. You all know that better than me. The end of the Space Shuttle program meant that many of our leading researchers, technicians, and space professionals no longer had a mission. Here at the Johnson Space Center alone, some 3,200 contractors were laid off. Cutbacks and consequences rippled through universities, research labs, our space industrial base, and even the Department of Defense. I mean, these were men and women who you knew, you worked with. They were men and women of creativity and intellect and unparalleled skill, but they were frankly victims of our government's short-sightedness in those days. America lost nearly a decade of space experience. And frankly, we'll never know the opportunities that we missed and the progress that was missed in that time. But let me promise all of you and all of the men and women of NASA and our national space enterprise Our administration will not repeat the mistakes of the past. We will forge this new era of American leadership in space on your innovation and the extraordinary integrity and intellect and innovation of our space workforce. The Johnson Space Center has already given us a glimpse of what the future will hold. This center is now a thriving hub of partnership between the federal government and America's pioneering space companies. You've worked closely, and Mark and I were just talking about this, you've worked very closely with private industry to deliver critical cargo and material to the International Space Station through the Commercial Resupply Services, which has already successfully completed 23 different missions with more on the way. As we speak, you're making remarkable progress on the Commercial Crew Program. Earlier this month, as President Trump celebrated himself, NASA announced the astronauts who will conduct the first flights on Boeing's Starliner and SpaceX Dragon, and they'll be going as early as next year. But really, we're just getting started. This is just the beginning. As NASA reorients toward human space exploration, our private companies and visionary innovators are going to take the lead in developing the regions closer to home. They will do as Americans have always done, will inspire the world with their ability to create opportunity and, frankly, prosperity. Not out of thin air, out of nowhere. And our administration, as we speak, is working with the Congress to give NASA the funding you need to ensure that these new space pioneers are given the freedom and the flexibility to be able to develop what they should develop and make it a smooth transition to an exciting future of collaboration. Johnson Space Center is going to continue to play an essential and irreplaceable role in navigating America's future in low Earth orbit. You can count on it. America will not ever abandon the critical domain of space. We will open the way for innovators and development, and we will lead once again in human exploration. And as I stand here today at the home of our civilian spaceflight program, let me also assure my fellow Americans that under President Trump's leadership, we're also taking steps as we speak to ensure that American national security is as dominant in space as it is here on Earth. We're already deploying new technologies and more resilient satellites. Earlier this month at the Pentagon, it was my privilege to lay out President Trump's plan to establish a sixth branch of our armed forces, the United States Space Force. The United States Space Force, we believe, is an idea whose time has come. Just as our nation established the Air Force to ensure American dominance in the skies in the mid-20th century, in this still new century, we will create an armed service devoted solely to advancing American security in space. And the need is real. Just this week, the Pentagon released a report showing that China is aggressively weaponizing space. Russia, too, is developing and testing new and dangerous weapons and technologies to counter America's space capabilities. Now, let me assure my fellow Americans here, our administration is committed to keep America ahead of our adversaries in this critical domain. And as we speak, the Department of Defense is moving forward with initial steps to strengthen American security in space, and we will continue to work with both parties in Congress to provide the necessary authorities and funding to stand up a new branch of our armed forces. And the United States Department of Space Force will be a reality by the year 2020. You know, it really is incredible to think about the history you all have made here. It's humbling for me to serve as your vice president, but also to have been asked by the president to serve in the role as chairman of the National Space Council. The truth is our nation has not only inspired our people, but we've inspired the world by the progress that we've made. And it's been because of all of you, because of the work that you've done here, because of the tireless and peerless work of NASA. But the truth is, as much as it's been important for NASA to lead in the past, you are the linchpin to American success in the future. The truth is, with all of you, we will go farther, farther than ever before. We will bring distant places and opportunities closer to the grasp of future Americans. We'll be remembered in our time for having done our part for the ongoing and limitless reach of the American dream. So today I just simply want to leave you with a challenge. As we write this new chapter of American exploration, I urge you to embrace this new energy and these new opportunities. Rededicate yourselves to the mission of NASA after you leave here today. Know that you have in this president and our entire administration, and I believe in the hearts of the American people and those that represent them, you have great champions and great advocates that are anxious to see your work expand. I just know in my heart, in our lifetimes, with your renewed energy and creativity and dedication, we will do as Americans have always done. NASA will awe the world with our daring heroes, with our discoveries, and with our relentless determination to bring new horizons and new vistas within the reach of mankind. This is a fitting time to rededicate ourselves to the noble mission of this agency. For this year marks the 50th anniversary of really a seminal moment of American leadership in space, an achievement that inspired not only our nation but all the world. It was Christmas Eve, 1968. The heroes of Apollo 8, Bill Anders, Jim Lovell, Frank Borman, were orbiting their craft above the moon's foreboding surface. History records as they rounded the moon on that fateful night, on the horizon they saw home, an oasis of light and color and warmth floating untethered in the dark void. They were the first to catch a glimpse of our world as heaven sees it. Through the ingenuity and courage of your predecessors, they were farther away from us than any humans had ever been. And on that night, they spoke to the world from that spacecraft. Not about the gray moon that was beneath them, but about the miracle that rose from the horizon before them. And as the world listened, history records they read ancient verses from the book of Genesis, that in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. And they close with the verse, and God saw it was good. Those pioneers saw from that far perspective that however deep into the cosmos we may reach, our destiny, mankind's destiny, is not only here on earth, it is in the heavens as well. So men and women of the Johnson Space Center, men and women of NASA, here and watching around the country, let's go forth and meet that destiny together and do what Americans have always done. Let's seize it with ingenuity and courage. And let's seize it with faith. You can be confident. The American people have faith in all of you. We've seen what you've done before and those that have served in your positions before, pushing the boundaries of human knowledge, forging a new era of American leadership in space. You've done it before. We know you'll do it again. We go forth with faith in the ideals that bind us together as a nation and give us purpose as a people. Ideals that America will take freedom into the farthest reaches of this new frontier as well. And finally, for those of you who will guide this mission on a personal level, I want to assure you that millions of Americans will carry you in their prayers. And they have faith and hope you have confidence that as you go, you do not go alone. That millions of Americans will claim that ancient promise that if you rise on the wings of the dawn, if you go up to the heavens, even there his hand will guide you. His right hand will hold you fast. Our heroes will go with the prayers of the American people. So thank you for the warm welcome today. Thank you for your extraordinary work. I leave here today more confident than ever with the renewed commitment of all of you here at the Johnson Space Center and all the men and women of NASA who are advancing America's space enterprise every single hour of the day. With the strong leadership of President Donald Trump and a renewed vision for American leadership in space, led by the President, supported in our Congress, strong support of the American people, and with God's help, I know that our nation has a brighter future than ever in the boundless expanse of space, and we will lead into that future together. Thank you. God bless you, and God bless America.
All right, guys. Well, a pretty great update there from Vice President Pence, the head of the Space Force Agency, the unit within the administration, updating on what we're going to be seeing in the coming weeks, coming months, and years. Of course, a lot to be seen. I'm sure we're going to be hearing a lot more about this new agency, and that was live from NASA headquarters in Houston. But we want to thank you guys for being part of our stream today. Thanks so much for hanging out and commenting and being engaged by our live stuff here. We have some great stuff coming up for you again tomorrow, so be sure to join us at 11:30 on our stream. Take a live look at Vice President Pence touring that facility from earlier today, and we'll close it out there, and we'll catch you again tomorrow. Thanks, guys.